Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. If you're new to iRacing or just getting started, it might feel a bit overwhelming by all the settings and controls that are available in iRacing. But don't worry, today I'm going to walk you through how to set everything up from controls to settings to pedal controls, wheel controls, force feedback, going through the camera motions, and a few other things. So whether you're jumping into your first race for the first time or just fine-tuning your setup, this video should have you covered, so let's dive on in. Okay, so what we're going to do for the first part of this video is walk you through the settings within the actual race session and get this thing to where it's working for your computer. I say your computer because everybody's is going to be different, mine included. I'll walk you through what I have for settings, and that's based off of my computer setup that is down in the description. Which is basically an i7 12th gen with a 4070 Ti, as well as 64 gigs of RAM. Now, again, this is going to be different for everybody. I can run a little bit more towards the high-end side, not quite totally that high-end, but these should get you going in the right directions a little bit. So the first thing that we're going to do is come over to the options menu, which is where all of this is going to be located. This is the first part that you come to. So if it's your first time in the game and you haven't done anything, obviously we're going to have to get our wheel and pedals set up first before anything, or otherwise we can't spend any laps. So what we'll do, since mine doesn't pop up to actually configure it, I'll just go from word go here. We're going to go ahead and click on steering. Very simple. You're just basically going to turn the wheel one way completely to lock, the other all the way back the other way completely to lock, bring the wheel back to as close to center as we can get it, and click done. Now we're going to take and turn the wheel left 90 degrees, which I know with my wheel is exactly 900. Ooh, and we'll get it, and we'll click done. Return that to center. The next thing you would usually do is force your pedals, so we'll go ahead and do those really quick. And we're going to depress the throttle fully and release it. Click done. We'll do the same thing with the brakes. Now, this may be different for you than it is for me. I have a set of load cell pedals. If you've got like a G923 or a Thrustmaster T248, chances are you don't have load cell pedals. So make sure that load cell brake pedal is unchecked. If you do have load cell pedals, like the Moza SRPs or something of that nature that has a load cell in it, make sure that that is checked. That will come into play here in a little bit. So we'll go ahead and just depress it. I've got to press a little harder than most. And then we ease off and we're done. Now, this part is completely optional. If you have a clutch and you like to use it, by all means, map the clutch. If you don't have a clutch, you're not comfortable with it, just go ahead and leave that to auto clutch, and you can get by without actually having a clutch. But if you need to detect it, calibrate to detect clutch is what you want to select. We depress it and we let off and we're done. Now you'll notice that one went a little bit faster, and I'll explain why here in a little while. And then as far as the gearbox, most people are not going to want to run in auto mode. We're here for the simulation. We want to have it as realistic as possible. I have a Fanatec H pattern shifter that I like to use. A lot of people like to use the flippers on their wheel. Whichever you have or choose to use, that's fine. Basically, we're going to map the shift up and the shift down for, they call it sequential, but if it's your only option, then obviously that's what you want to do. So whichever paddle you want to use for your up or your down, go ahead and use that. I like to use the sequential on my Fanatec. So we're going to go ahead and just click up, and there is my up shift. We click done. We pull down. There's my down shift. I don't like to use the H pattern that often. It gives me a few fits, so I'm just going to go ahead and click no. If all you have is the paddles, you're just going to tell it no as well. So click done with that. Now there's a couple other options about entering the car, towing the car, that sort of thing. I like to leave those pretty much default, which is E for the enter and exit of the car, and then Z and X for our look left, look right. I don't assign an up and down because there's not really a reason to. So I would just go ahead and leave that as unassigned. Now coming back to the main screen, now that we've got all of that stuff done, a couple of things that we do want to make sure of is that our steering wheel is mapped to 900 degrees, and then our map range is 900 degrees. So make sure that that is set correctly. Again, with the brakes, the load cell versus non-load cell. If you have a load cell, make sure that the box is checked on. That will force the game to realize, hey, we're using pressure, we're not using travel. So you'll want to make sure that's checked on, and then you can adjust the range of that pedal. I like to leave it at 100, and then it just makes it very simple. Now, as far as force feedback, because we're going to skip over clutch, because for me, I don't really mess with that. I just kind of leave it where it's at, and we'll call that good. But the force feedback part, if you have a direct drive wheel, so a Moza, a Fanatec, something of that nature, obviously make sure force feedback is enabled and use linear mode is checked. I don't like to reduce the force when parked, and my reasoning for that is if you're sitting on pit road and you go to take off, and you know this is all technology, so I mean any of this can fail at any point. If you go to take off and there's no force feedback, you're going to know it almost instantly if you have that option checked off. If you have it checked on, it won't start to register the force feedback until you start to move. So you could theoretically roll out with no force feedback, and then you got to reboot your wheel, and it's a pain in the butt. So, go ahead and make sure that you get that set. A couple other things as far as strength and Newton meters and all of that stuff, your wheel force should very closely match what wheel you have. You have a Logitech or a Thrustmaster T248, chances are high you're right around 2.5, 3 Newton meters. That's all the wheel force you're going to have. Mine's checked to auto because it'll pull it in from the Moza software, but that's where it's going to pull from. The strength side is going to be a little bit adjustable, and you can kind of play with that, but we'll get to that here in a little bit. But that should at least get you on track, get you moving. You can turn on different driving aids. I like to run the anti-stall clutch just from a standpoint of I drive a lot of different vehicles, and it makes it a pain to have to remember where the clutch bite and everything is at for me. And then you can turn on and off driving aids, auto tear-offs, auto wipers. Some series won't allow you to have throttle assist, brake assist, pit exit, driving lines, things of that nature, so keep that in mind. Now, if you're going to use different shifters and stuff per car, different settings for buttons and things like that, you want to make sure you click that use custom controls for this car, and it will allow you to map things individually per car that you run. So the next thing that I really want to look at here is the on-screen displays. And what I mean by that is this box right here that you have with your FPS. We come back into options, we go options again. I like to have most of these turned on except for the video timer. The video timer doesn't really mean anything to me. But I like to have the controls, the radio box, black box. But this is the real big part. Make sure that this is checked to show the frame rate meter with, and then you can have your graphics, your network, your system, your audio, your steering. This will come in handy as we start messing with things in a couple of the next pieces. Also, make sure that your chat messages while driving and system messages while driving are turned on, because they may pertain to either race control stuff or incident points, things of that nature. You'll want to have that in there. Coming to the miscellaneous section, I don't mess with too much here. The game audio is where I usually mess with most everything. That being said, so like chat volume, engine volume, gear volume, rev limiters, all sorts of things. You'll want to adjust this stuff to your liking and what you want to hear and where you want to hear it. I also do like to usually set up buttons to raise and lower the volume on an instant off of my keyboard. And that'll be in the control section as well. Now, coming to graphics, which is the biggest part of why we're here. So a lot of people like it to look really nice. when they're in the car, but that comes at a cost. I say it comes at a cost of it'll cause weird lagging issues, screen tearing, it'll jitter on you if you're not careful. So a few things that I like to really look at. I run triples, so that's going to be a huge bog. But for most of you guys, you're going to be on a single screen, maybe an ultra wide, something of that nature if you're just starting out. So there's some things in here that you'll want to make sure that you have on, because you want to be able to see, obviously, and race safely and comfortably. One of those things is make sure your cockpit mirrors are on. I like to run 2. I've found that, and I think part of this is mostly my screen size, I've found that certain things you don't necessarily need to see, like the far right mirror sometimes, especially if you're in like a NASCAR car or something like that. And sometimes you can kind of cut out the in-car rear view mirror because you have the virtual mirror. So keep that in mind too. But a few things to note. You want to make sure that I usually take sky and clouds to low because you're not going to see it in the car. So the graphic setting is in the car. Keep that in mind. Like what you're seeing behind this graphic setting, this is actually the replay mode that renders this part. So two separate things here. And then as far as any of the rest of the stuff, I do like to leave the cars to high because I like the cars to look as realistic as possible. The rest of it kind of goes with what do you want to see? Some things that really make a difference on FPS are objects, crowds, grandstands. You may play with those depending on your machine, set them to high or low. A couple of these options have medium, that sort of thing. Another thing, if you're doing a lot of like IMSA stuff where we're going to see 60 cars, that sort of thing, you may change your max car draws. By changing the max car draw, it'll limit that down and it's less stuff that your computer has to draw, which is kind of nice. Frame rate, I like to lock it. There's a reason that I like to lock it. So my screens do 165 hertz. I would lock it to whatever your monitor is capable of. I say lock it because if you can free up some of that graphical memory, it'll run a lot smoother. So why should we be pushing more frames than what our monitor can take in? If we can make it run smoother by putting a frame rate lock on it, you're a lot better off. I think you'll be a lot happier in the end as well. Now, anti-aliasing, I've been running SMAA for quite a while. It tends to tax my machine a lot less. It adds a few more ridges, that sort of thing. I'm not too worried about it. Make sure that you have object self-shadowing off. Even me running a 4070 Ti, I keep it off because it kills frame rates. So I just shut that off, as well as night shadow maps and the wall stuff. I do leave my shader quality at high. A lot of times it likes to bump over to super, and that'll also kill your frame rates. If you're in any of the IndyCars dirt stuff, you don't want to have obstructions in the way. You can hide obstructions to where it's like you're hiding the cockpit, halo, the pillar, the rock cage, things like that. I just shut all that off because I don't like having all this stuff in the way. You can have it not show the steering wheel or hide it. I do turn off 2-pass trees, high quality trees, because again, I'm going by them so fast in a race car. Does it really matter if they're high quality? I also disable the high detail in mirrors because I just want to know if there's a car back there. As far as everything in this little section, for now, I would leave the sharpening, the HDR off. The hide car numbers pertains to trading paints with custom car numbers and that sort of thing. If you're running a lot of league stuff, obviously you might have that on. But for the most part, leave it off because it'll give you the number of the car, the official number of the car in race, so you're not making confusion there. But that's essentially what we've got here with our graphics displays. This should get you rolling. For some of you, these settings may work great. Give them a shot. If your frame rates are still too low and you're not liking it and it's doing some screen tearing and that sort of thing, try lowering some of that stuff, and it may help. Now, like I said, the replay section is what we see when we're outside of the car. You can usually set these a little bit higher just because of the fact that your it's not having to render at the same time that you're racing. So again, a lot of the same settings, that sort of thing. So it's going to be something that you're going to want to look at and play with and see if you can't figure that part out. Again, as our sound setting stuff, this is all going to be in-game sound settings. Like I said, you'll want to change this to how you want it. Set yourself a lower and higher button set where you can turn down at least voice chat. 'Cause sometimes it does get a bit out of hand. So as far as your mic, point that to whatever you're using for your mics. That way your crew chief can hear you, other people can hear you. Enabling voice chat will also give you voice chat in game. Also, make sure you enable the radio scripting. That will then force you to go from all teams to drivers when you're in or out of the car. It's something that you really should know, because when you're in car, everything switches over to driver's channel instead of all teams. If you're on all teams while you're in the car, nobody's going to hear you. Now, as far as your controls, all of these are personal preference. I highly suggest having an ignition button. I like to use the default, which is I set a lot of different things to my wheel, including my push to talk, sometimes brake bias sets, things of that nature. I also have some stream decks that handle a lot of this. But for the most part, go through this, memorize it, know where you put it. If you need a sticky note for where things are on your wheel and how you have those set, make sure that you've got that. But that should help you gauge how you want things set up in this whole section. Another thing is make sure you've got either tear-offs or a headlight flash set, depending on what car you're in. I like to keep those kind of separate, but then that way you've got a clear visor or you've got a way to flash your lights at people. One other thing to note before we leave this whole screen, I've come back to the graphics setting. As far as resolution, try to run this in 1080p. There's some graphics cards that may allow you to run 2K, that sort of thing. I would not suggest trying to run it in 4K. It is DX11, guys. There's only so much we're going to be able to do until we see an upgrade from iRacing for that. Couple other things to note. If we click on monitors, make sure that you have your monitor type set up correctly. Your width, your bezel width, and if there's a curve to it. Like I said, I run triples, so I have to render 3 projections and enable SMP MVP to get it to render properly across all 3 screens here. Your viewing distance, that's going to be from the screen to your face. It will compute, it'll give you a field of view in driving. That may not totally be correct, and I'll explain why here in just a few. Okay, so now we're sitting in the car. Your view may look a little different than the way that mine does currently. But we're going to go ahead and I'm going to move my black box on the main screen so you can see what we're kind of tweaking with here. To do that, all you have to do is hit Alt-K at the same time. It'll let you move the boxes around on screen to where you'd like them, that sort of thing. But so we're going to go over to our graphic adjustment page. And that's where all of this is going to come in and what you see and how you see it. So I like to use 160 in most of the NASCAR cars with a FOV on the virtual rear mirror, which is our mirror up top there. That kind of gets us as close as we can to having the best setup for triples. But the one thing that you'll notice, and I've seen this a ton, and I don't know why, the inherent idea is to... We're just going to roll this back. The want is to set it like this, so you can see out your side mirrors and your front windshield, but how are you going to hit the apex? It's going to be a problem. You need to be able to see to hit the apex, right? So if I just take... Oop, we're at our wit's end on the number there. If I just take and go to here, I can see more, right? And like I said, if you're running a single screen, it's going to look different. But right about here, you can still see out the side. You can see out most of the front windshield. And you've got this FOV for the rear view mirror, which I will show you how to adjust that as well, which will come into play. But about a 170 FOV is probably good for most people. So that way you can see as much of the front windshield as possible. And then you can do things like shift the horizon, and I'll explain why we do that here in just a minute. And then you've got your driver height that you can, we can go way down or we can go way up, and you can see the whole hood and the roof and things of that nature. So the reason that, if we look at, obviously with my triples, like I said, I like to run 160, and we were talking about this shift horizon. So if we bring this back to 0, we can see quite a bit of things, but obviously we're sitting too low now, because if I go off of how my steering wheel sits in relation to the screen, especially with triples, you should be able to line these up. So now that that's lined up with my steering wheel, at a place like Daytona or Talladega, it's going to cut out a lot of my viewing around the corner. Think of like what Dale Sr. had said about lowering the seat in a super speedway car so you could see around the top of the windshield here. So I like to lower the seat down, go a little bit negative, and then I swing that horizon up, and now I can see around the corner a little bit better, and it generally helps you out there. So like I said, we can adjust the FOV on the rear view mirror. The FOV is set in the graphics setting, but we can adjust the pitch and the yaw. So I can take and, adjust my main mirror out, especially if you're going to run a main mirror, but hey, we've only got so much that we can see out, right? We can change the pitch on it, and while this mirror, and you guys can't see it, this mirror has another 4 inches over on my right screen, but I can twist it to see out the corner of that rear window. So use the things you have to your advantage, right? This should help you be able to see more around the track. Now, the other thing that we can adjust is this mirror over here. But first, I'm going to take my my main mirror back to normal, so that way it doesn't become an issue in the next race that I do. And then we're going to go to the left side mirror, and we can adjust this out too. So while you can't see out the window net that I have over here, this will let you adjust that little mirror and get to where you can see down the side of the car, so that way you're going to clear somebody just fine and not have an issue in wreck. And then, like I was saying about the Z and EX keys earlier, those will allow you to look left and look right. This comes in very handy as well when you're in a car with a single screen. I've seen a lot of guys do this so they can quickly see over, are they clear, are they not clear, and be able to pass cleanly and clear where they need to go. Now, another thing that's on this black box that I forgot to talk about is the FFB strength, and this is where a lot of wheel configuration comes in. We've already done the calibration and things of that nature. Realistically, if you set this up correctly, outside of iRacing, you should have the wheel set up to 100%. Give it everything it's got. Once you get into the car, that's where you need to make your fine-tuned adjustments. Now, with an R9, with this specific car, I know that if I do a couple of laps around here and click the auto button, it'll set to right around 11.4, 11.6, somewhere in there. For your wheel, it may be less, it may be more. But what I can tell you is, and I can pull this over onto screen so you can see it. If you look right here above that rear wind, or above the rear view mirror, you've got this F that has a green blinking bar. If I do this with the wheel, that is your force feedback indicator. If I crank this over and it starts to get into the yellow, that's okay. But when we start to get to red, it'll do what they call clipping. And at that point, it goes to a linear force feedback. So all my force feedback right now is the same. So you lose that feel. If you see that starting to kind of do one of these where it's blinking yellow and red, your force feedback's too high in game. You need to turn that FFB back until you see it just barely yellow. You want to see green to yellow. You don't want to see red. So if it's doing that bounce off the red, it's clipping. You want to turn that down because you're starting to lose feel. So you just do that by turning this down or up. Like I said, I know this car is 11.6 and it just works. So keep that in mind as you're going around the track, because the better you can feel on the wheel, the better you'll be in almost any race. And you'll probably need to adjust that track to track as the setup's a little different. All right. So now that we've popped back out of the car, we have the car on track. Technically, it's sitting on pit road, but I'm going to show you kind of some camera angles and things that will become handy for you as you start to learn. Obviously, iRacing's got this camera option right here. It's on TV too. We can click left. It'll change our camera option. But the ones that come in handy are the chase, rear chase, and far chase. I really like to use far chase a lot, because as you try to learn what you did wrong in Rex, or if it was something you could avoid, something of that nature, far chase is going to become very handy. Now, we can hit the space bar. It makes our bars go away. Great, but maybe our angle is not that great, right? So we'll click space bar to bring it back up. And then if you hit Control F12, it'll bring up this whole option, and you can adjust a whole bunch of stuff. Like you get your static FOV, that you can adjust out, but maybe you want just a different angle. If you click left on the Z, it'll drop this down. If you click to the left on X, it'll pull it back, and we can kind of play with different angles. Y will adjust the pitch left to right. But this will help you dissect your caution or your wrecks or what have you, incidents, things of that nature, and let you see kind of, okay, was your situational awareness off? Was it a netcode sort of incident? Which will help you become a better racer in the long run. And really, with almost any wreck that you have, look at it objectively. First, did I cause that or did I not? And then, if I didn't cause it, how could I avoid it? Or is there something that I could have done differently? And if you did cause it, okay, what did I do to cause that? Should I have done something differently? The other suggestion that I have is, if you get into a wreck and it's with another racer, look at the replay before you say anything. That will help you immensely. Number one, if there's an agitation factor in all of it, which there usually will be, the simple answer of saying, I haven't looked at the replay yet, let me look at it and I will get back to you. Generally, people will calm down in that aspect. If you look at the replay and go, man, I did cause that, just own it. You'll be amazed at what, and I'm sorry, hey, I should have done this different, will get you. Because some of these people you may race with for quite a while. You know, especially as you get to a higher split level and you're racing with the same guys all the time, you don't want to have to jump into a race with a guy and always wonder if he's going to possibly take you out. So use the camera options. You know, even the TV cameras, when you're in game, you can kind of see things that you may have not seen. So, you know, definitely use those. Use the Control F12 to change your angles if you need to. Control F12 again makes that box go away, but it is a very, very handy piece of the software that can help you get better as time goes on. So hopefully these few things have helped you kind of understand how the system works, how the software works, and maybe you found something that you didn't know even really existed in iRacing as a whole. I plan to do more of these videos to kind of help with the beginner side, some of the tech side of it, and to help racers get better as it goes. If you guys enjoyed the content, please make sure that you like and subscribe, and click that bell, because I'm going to try and post these every Thursday as like a Tech Thursday thing. So, you know, any help that I can to grow this segment and make things easier for you guys. If you have something that I missed that you want clarification on, put a comment down in the comments below. I'll make sure that I either get you an answer or we'll make a segment about it, something of that nature. But I would anticipate more of this type of stuff to be coming here in the future. So thanks everybody for watching. We'll catch you at the races.